whatever the fuck it is. Welcome to episode 5 of an Earful podcast. And this episode, illustrator Graham Humphreys, who is notably known for the work on the Nightmare on Elm Street and all the other Nightmare on Elm Streets, Evil Dead, House of Thousand Corpses, and much, much more.
Yeah, so we do dive into how these pieces came to be for the Evil Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street and all that, how he approaches creating these pieces of art. We also talk about the influence of the music in the late 70s, early 80s, moreover goth music and the Batcave, which was a highlight for me, as you know.
Of course.
And we also just get on to talking about classic horrors and more like the Hammer horror films and British cult films, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we've packed a lot into this episode, to be honest. So
yeah, do you know what? After doing this episode, I realised I need to rewatch a shitload of horrors.
Yeah.
But yeah. So for all of Graham's work, we're going to link below to his website, his book that he talks about, Hung, Drawn and Executed, and where to follow Graham. Highly recommend it. Such a cool dude, as you're about to find out on this episode. Enjoy.
Enjoy.
And we're off. Anything we say now is public record.
Good job we're not live.
Yeah, it is.
Oh God, yeah. Right, I'm going to get this out of the way before I babble on about it too much, but I've got to say that you have probably created one of my favorite movie posters ever. So I'm going to get that out of the way now. Do it to just break the ice, and then we can go from there. So yeah, Elm Street 1, huge fan of your poster on that one.
It seems to be the most popular of all the ones I've done. So thank you anyway, though. I appreciate that.
It's very much appreciated.
Do you get that a lot? A lot of people, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mind. I mean, it's very, very flattering, of course, though, and it's just weird because it's such an old piece that, I don't think it really meant that much to people at the time, bizarrely. It just, it's only in the last sort of 8 years or so that people have started saying this. And I don't know, it's a generational thing that perhaps it's people that saw the poster when they were like kids, really, and it kind of, they kind of look back and they think, well, that was something that created an impact. I mean, people look back at their formative years. I mean, I do the same thing myself, and you realise certain things really kind of, left an impression in your mind, and you're not kind of aware of that until later in life. So I guess that might be one of the reasons anyway. But I used to carry it around in my portfolio, the original artwork, simply because, it just didn't seem precious to anybody, and it wasn't that precious to me either. So I used to carry around this original painting, and, as if it was just like a, old piece of paper.
That's great.
I'm curious, what have you got it framed in your own house now, or is it?
No, I actually parted company with it about 5 years ago. I as part of an exchange deal with a guy who agreed to publish a book of my work and set up an exhibition as well, of some retrospective exhibition. And part of that was that I'd worked out how much a book and an exhibition would cost, and it was all very ridiculous. It was on this kind of TV program where basically you kind of bring along stuff and hope to sell to a buyer, or 4 buyers in the program.
Yeah.
Dealers, and basically they're looking for something they can then sell on. Anyway, he basically said it was one of his favourite posters and he wanted it for his own collection. And I sort of believed him. And anyway, the idea was that he would have that painting and the Evil Dead 2 and give me some sort of nominal fee. And basically he would pay for the book and the exhibition, plus I'd get 50% of all the book sales, which sounded great.
Right.
As it happened, I've never seen a penny from the book. I did get the exhibition. The book was published in a kind of very limited, very expensive form. Difficult for horror fans to buy, and I just thought it was a bit ill-conceived, really. And then he sold on both pieces of artwork at huge profits. I mean, I know how much Nightmare on Elm Street went for, and fortunately I know who has it as well, so I probably can get visiting rights if I want to. And the guy has said that if I wanted to exhibit it at any point, as long as the gallery was secure, obviously, then he'd be happy for me to show it. the one piece I do have is Freddy's Revenge. I still have that here at home.
Ah, sick.
And also the original Evil Dead artwork, which I still keep as well, though. Which is actually in the corner of this room right now.
Oh, come on! You have to show us. Can you show us with your?
Are you okay to wait 1 second?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna say no.
It's just been sitting on the floor, actually. It isn't. Anyway.
Oh my god.
What?
So it's not actually that big, if you can see.
No, yeah, I thought it would be bigger. Yeah.
I thought it'd be like.
Well, it's about A3 size, I suppose, which is, what is this about? 18 inches by about 12 inches or something. It's small. Basically, at the time, I had so little money that I had to work on quite a small scale, just simply to save the cost of the paper and paint. So everything I did at the time was quite small. I work a bit bigger now.
So how big was the Elm Street poster in comparison to that? So was it a bigger scale or about the same size?
It was just a little bit bigger, to be quite honest. Not big at all. Again, it was just a free reasons. And, it was just a comfortable size to work at the time. I find that just working slightly larger now is just, I can work faster, basically. And, because everything's deadline driven. So, the speed with which you work is quite key.
Yeah.
Whether you make money or not, essentially. It's but that's the bottom line,
So was the Evil Dead one of your first commission pieces for a film?
It was not, but it was the first that I tend to say was the most influential and the piece that actually kick-started my career. I had worked on a couple of posters before that. I mean, literally just months before, because literally it was about the second year I was actually working. I just left college.
Yeah.
And the first one was a bit of a disaster, and people still bring it up, and I think bringing it up is probably the right word. But I did a poster for the Monster Club, and that was about 1981. And really, I don't think I had the skill set to pull it off properly. And also there was some difficulty with it in as much that within the brief, which was a very specific brief, they gave me a sketch, said we need this. So literally it's almost like tracing off the sketch. And just, imbue it with your own style and colours, which I did. But they thought the colours looked a bit too kind of frightening, because they were aiming for a sort of kids kind of family kind of approach for the poster, which was kind of odds really with what it was. And so they kind of rejected that first piece of artwork, which was quite a big thing for me at the time. It was like a real kind of blow. But they said that if you can deliver a second piece with sort of more family friendly colours, then that's fine. We'll just go ahead. So I had 2 days, and so I kind of literally worked 3 nights and 2 days just non-stop, which I've never done again since. I was hallucinating by the end of it. But I delivered this piece of art, which they printed, and they were happy with it. And it's still, I still think is one of the most embarrassingly bad pieces I've ever done in my life. But that's the first one. I don't really like to talk about it that much, but I just did actually.
Sorry to make you.
Sorry about that.
Same client had just bought in distribution rights for Toby Hooper's Funhouse, and they commissioned me to do a poster for that. And naively, I didn't even know who Toby Hooper was. I mean, I knew the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I didn't know much about who directed it or anything like that. I was quite naive about my films, but anyway, they wanted it quite quick, and so I did some sketches, and they quite liked them. And then they said, "Oh, by the way, we're going to release it as a double bill suddenly." So the whole format had to change, and then they said, "We're releasing it with My Bloody Valentine." So I ended up doing 2 pieces of artwork for the one double bill. So that was my second poster. Again, it's not a piece I'm particularly happy with, and I think I was still finding my stride. Yeah. In a way, and looking, trying to get confidence in what I was doing, and I think I was holding back on those pieces, and that was probably the problem. Whereas with the Evil Dead, I thought, sod it, I'm just going to do what I want. I did, and fortunately, it was a something that worked for the client and for the audience as well. So, and for Sam Raimi, I'm very happy to say. So that really is what I would call ground zero in terms of poster work.
Yeah. So how did you get your start in regards to actually getting in contact with these picture companies and making you start doing this sort of artwork?
Well, funny enough, I was recalling this earlier on. I was doing a little email interview for somebody, and they, people always say, "How did you get the Evil Dead job?" And go through this whole thing about it, Palace Pictures and turning up their office with a folio of work and stuff. There are a couple of stories around that, but mostly, at the time, we're talking about 1982, and no mobile phones, no internet, no computers, none of that existed at the time. Also, I had so little money, sharing this squalid little flat with some friends. We had a telephone which would receive calls, but you couldn't make calls on it. So to make calls, you had to go to the local public telephone box.
Yeah.
What I was doing all day long, just looking, for contacts and clients, trying to arrange meetings with people. And eventually, a friend of a friend suggested Palace Pictures, and they literally just started up business that month, I believe, or 2 months before. And because they were quite new, they didn't have expectations of how things should look, and I think they were looking for a different way of working. Now, I don't know if you know much about Palace Pictures. They really kind of came out of this cinema called the Scala Cinema, which was it's kind of small cinema in the middle of London, Goodge Street, and they specialised in showing stuff that you couldn't see elsewhere. I mean, John Waters films, for instance, you couldn't see anywhere else. So, Dick Jarman films, Thundercrack, the naughtiest film ever made, which always was guaranteed to fill up the auditorium. They showed music related films and stuff in the 50s, B-movie stuff.
Yeah.
Classic, monster stuff, Universal monster stuff. Plus, Herzog films, kind of art cinema stuff. And you get double bills, which would be, usually something which is slightly exploitation themed with something which would be kind of, quite high art, I guess, in many ways.
Yeah.
They did all-nighters, Dario Argento, all-nighters, things like that. So they were great, they were a great cinema, and it attracted an interesting crowd of people, musicians, actors, and it's, quite often you'd be sitting there watching this odd film, and an actor from the film would actually be in the audience, perhaps behind in front of you. I remember seeing films, like Members of the Damned might be sitting behind you. It's quite, quite an interesting mix. And so they moved from that small premises to the bigger premises in King's Cross. At the same time, they decided to expand on their kind of what their knowledge of their fan base was, if you like, and moved into VHS. And so they bought rights to the John Waters films. Which they tried to buy all the stuff they were showing, which hadn't actually been released otherwise at the time. So they were looking for ways that the audience could see the films without coming to the cinema. So, i.e., other places around the country.
Yeah.
And part of that was they decided they were going to release their own films. So the first film they released was a film called Diva, the French language film, a sort of thriller. And then they picked up The Evil Dead, which I think they probably picked up at the Cannes Film Festival or somewhere like that, for very little money, from what I understand, and just thought it'd be a fun movie to send out. As it happened, I turned up with my folio of work whilst they were wondering what to do with the poster. They knew they didn't want to use the American poster because I think they felt it was a little bit tame and a little bit sort of it wasn't confrontational in a way they wanted it to be. I guess. And I had a couple of pieces in my folio which they particularly liked, and so this one piece was a picture of Joan Crawford fighting off bats in her hair. Very odd, I know. There's reasons for that, but anyway, that was the piece they really liked, and so I've said to a few people before, Joan Crawford actually. I owe my horror career to Joan Crawford, basically. Mommy dearest.
So this company says like it, well, the cinema itself says like it was a kind of a big hub for film lovers, and not your kind of people obviously that will go to your cinema just on a weekend to watch a film. These were people that went there to see all these films they normally wouldn't get to see from the US and other places. Yeah.
I mean, basically, it's what you might term transgressive cinema in some way. Right? So, for instance, say Thundercrack was, completely banned, but they had a print and they used to show it. I don't know how they got away with that, but they did. They also famously used to run Clockwork Orange every now and again, which was officially banned in the UK.
Yeah.
And they ran into trouble with that, but and were taken to court over it. But they were quite clever. What they would do is they used to store all the films up in the some attic space, just all the the film reels, their own copies of the film.
Yeah.
And what they would do is, if it was a contentious film, they would simply strip on the front of it. It might be Gone with the Wind or something like that. First reel of Gone with the Wind. So basically, should the censors happen to do a little raid, they would just go through the cans, just think, oh, that's okay, just ignore it. Somewhere within that was they were probably looking for, but they couldn't find it. So there are ways and means of getting around it. But these two host festivals there. So what became the London Fright Fest originated at Scala Cinema as Shock Around the Clock, a sort of 24-hour horror event. And they bring over, great guests from the States. And we had, people like,
We've put you on the spot now.
I know.
Brian Yuzna. I remember Brian Yuzna coming over with people like Greg Nicotero, who'd done effects on the film.
Yeah.
But Bugrit, who did who did the necromantic films. They had. I'm trying to think now. I can't remember. I'm but it was great. But the cinema did bring over people like Herschel Gordon-Lewis. People I hadn't heard of myself at the time, and I probably didn't attend a lot of those events simply because I didn't know who they were. Now, of course, I'm kicking myself because I would have had the chance to met all those people right now. But the Cramps rolled up for the premiere of Return of the Living Dead. Yeah. And they introduced the film because obviously they had a track in there, and they were over touring at the time. They used to run Eastern Hero weekends, so you saw all the John Woo films before anybody knew who John Woo was, for instance, and things like Encounters of a Spooky Kind, and all these like mad kind of Korean and Hong Kong films. So it was a great place, a really good place. And as I say, the all-nighters were always interesting because it would attract not only the audience who were there to see the films, but also all the vagrants who were there for a warm, cozy night. It attracted people who were there to smoke drugs and just get really drunk, and so it could be quite wild sometimes. But if you got a John Waters all-nighter, I mean that's inevitable. I think.
I don't think we see any of that anymore, like all-nighters in cinemas. It seems to be. I was speaking with my girlfriend's dad the other day about when they used to go to the Wigan Casino Club for the Northern Soul nights. And I find it crazy that they just went all night as well, just dancing in there. You just don't see any of that anymore. Like everything just had a lot more soul and meaning to it. I guess the life's been sucked away from it now.
Yeah, the rules were laxer then, I guess. So, and also, I think that's partly because the world has changed because of the internet as well, and that could have been secret knowledge at the time, but now it's just everybody knows about stuff, so that you can't conceal things anymore.
No. So, in regards to music, do you say have you worked with the Cramps before? Did you do some of their...
one album cover for them, which I didn't meet them at all for that. There was no communication whatsoever.
Right.
As at the time, they'd left the label, which was based here in the UK, which was Miles Copeland's IRS label. And they'd fallen out with Miles in quite severe terms. And and anyway, he decided that, well, they went to court. They weren't allowed to record anything new, which is how the Smell of Female album came about, because that was a live recording. So they couldn't go into a studio to record stuff, but they could put out a live album.
Yeah.
And Miles just thinking, and the band had got become really, really quite popular at the time, and quite big within the scene in the UK. And they're in high demand. And Miles just thought, well, what we can do is just mine the back catalogue here and just put out a compilation album, which is what they did. And because I was doing work with IRS at the time already, and they knew that I liked the Cramps, I was an obvious choice for them. And they knew I'd be cheap as well. I think probably might have helped. But anyway, I decided that it'd be great to do this 3D cover, and they went for it straight away. And that helped propel sales of the album, which went, I mean, nowadays a silver album isn't very much, but for a band like the Cramps to get to go silver was quite a big deal. And sort of this indie band who actually weren't even allowed to record at the time, suddenly they had a silver album. So I've got a silver disc downstairs. They actually gave me a silver disc.
Oh, nice.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Graham Humphreys acknowledged the sales of, because they said, I helped propel the sales. So that's very gratifying. I heard back later that the Cramps did like the cover, so that was okay. But I was a bit worried about being cursed by them. I've heard that they cursed the art director of the company for a design she did for a single, The Crusher. And they didn't like the cover. Apparently cursed her, and I didn't want to be cursed by the Cramps. So I used your name on the cover, just in case. Not more words.
That's mental.
With that design, it's from the sounds of it, it sounded like you pitched your idea. Did you ever get any brief of what they were going for, or was it all?
No, not at all. There had, I think the same release was coming out in America, and they called it Bad Music for Bad People. It has an illustration on it, which, a great illustration, but I think they just wanted to mark the difference. I think much in the same way that Palace Pictures had realised that there was a different kind of audience in the UK, especially at that time, for horror and for music. And the two kind of went hand in hand in many ways, and the Scala Cinema was the proof of that. I think that because IRS Records had seen they knew the film poster work, and so they kind of thought that I would be able to make a good judge of what was going to sell here in the UK, which fortunately turned out to be right.
So, as you were saying, when the music and the movies went hand in hand, I know obviously back in the early 80s, late 70s as well, you had London was massive on its goth music. Obviously, you had like the birthday parties using the Banshees and all that, the Batcave. And then along with that, you had New York, which was coming out with all the post-punk sort of stuff as well at the same time. How much of an influence did that have on yourself when it came to work and doing all that sort of thing?
Oh, I'd been exposed to music probably at the age of about 16. I went to art college, so I went to art college quite early. Most people go when they're 18, but I was a bit of a swot, so I had my qualifications. So I went straight in there, and just at that same time, obviously the punk scene was just breaking in London, and so although I was out in the West Country, Salisbury, there were a few people at the art college who would travel up to London to see the Sex Pistols and all the other bands, and they kind of brought back the influence back to the college. They were the first people I ever saw to dress in this kind of way, which was quite terrifying for quite a rural area at the time. It's the first time I've seen people wearing safety pins and kind of particular ways of doing, wearing your hair and stuff, and it was all quite terrifying for people at the time. But I actually friended these people fairly swiftly, and you kind of realise actually there was a little bit more than just the shock value, and I started getting into the music, and so by the time I left college in 1980, I was already a big Susan and Banshees fan, and the Cramps had just really emerged, I guess, in the UK as a sort of an act that people could access. So I carried that with me, and the music really did influence everything I was doing. I was a huge fan of Joy Division whilst I was at college as well, and you know, when you're at college, what you're doing is also, especially in the final year, building up samples of work, which you hope will be able to sell you to clients when you leave.
Yeah.
So I was already doing work influenced directly by Season of Banshees and Joy Division, and you know, trying to capture the feel of the music in paint form. And really, the Evil Dead poster is very much a direct link to that early work. The technique I used was something I developed at college, and you know, specifically listening to the type of music that I was, and it was an expression, a way of trying to visualize the sound of punk rock, I guess, in sort of paint form, and the choice of colors and everything else as well. So it was kind of a natural thing for me. And when I started working, for instance, with Lord of the New Church, it was Brian James I spoke to first, I think, who was a big horror fan, and you know, his favorite film was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He'd just seen an Evil Dead, and it was his new favorite film, and he loved the poster as well. And so that was a natural kind of a natural collaboration, if you like, which you know, kind of then sort of led on to working with Brian James in his solo work, and then ultimately, I guess, going full circle back to The Damned as well, who I adored, of course, as well, and was lucky enough to be able to work with them over the last few years as well.
It's crazy. I've got to ask though as well, because I am a huge like fan of the goth like side of music, alternative rock from the 80s and 70s. What was the Batcave actually like then? Because I'm guessing you've been there.
Yeah, I used to go.
Often, yeah.
It was, you know, it was my natural habitat, if you like.
Yeah.
I remember when it first opened, it was announced in the music press, and you know, it said they'd be playing blah blah blah, the Cramps, Season of Banshees, you know, all this sort of thing. It's the place just for me. Yeah. I remember the very first night it opened, and literally the queue was so huge, just couldn't get in. So I didn't bother going back because I just knew that it was going to be just a hassle trying to get there. A few months later, it moved to another location in Leicester Square.
Yeah.
And I thought, sort of, I'm going to give it a go. And actually, that was easier to get into. They had more space there, and so you could move around. I think, you know, they had a fire restriction at the previous original place.
Right.
And I think it's only accessed via a lift or something crazy like that.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, the Batcave moved, and it moved again a couple of times. But I used to go every single week because I loved it. I loved the music. And, you know, it's just incredible. You go in there and there'd be Susie popping up the bar. There'd be Nick Cave in another corner.
That's insane.
You know, I saw Kirk Brandon from Theatre of Hate in there hanging out quite often. Just suddenly all these people, there was the music playing, and the people were in there having a drink at the bar. It's incredible.
That's mad.
At least, you know, green old horror films, you know, Universal movies, Dario Argento stuff. And then, of course, they'd have live music every week. So they had the house band, The Specimen, who would perform.
Oh, yeah.
Einstein's in Overton performed once there, but they started using a rock drill on the pillars and had to be stopped in case they were never asked back again. But I saw Jane County, who was Wayne County, and Electric Chairs performed there a couple of times. So it was a bit of a mix. You never knew who you were going to be seeing, but it was always interesting. And but just great fun. I mean, I used to play, you know, there's only, the goth scene was quite new, so there was only a limited amount of stuff they could actually play which would be actually termed goth. So they used to play a lot of glam rock, you know, a lot of David Bowie stuff, obviously, but you know, The Sweet, Mud, T-Rex, obviously.
Yeah.
And although we can hardly say it now, a lot of Gary Glitter as well. But they used to, you know, occasionally you get a lot of old rock and roll as well. They'd play,
like rockabilly sort of stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well, it was kind of just at the beginning of that, I guess, as well. So, for instance, the first time I actually saw the Cramps perform live, they were supported by the Meteors, and that's one of their first big shows. And supporting the very, very first act on stage was Screaming Lord Sutch, which of course goes back to the 1960s and early 70s, I guess, which was an era which kind of inspired people like, I guess, well, the Cramps, you know, idolised Screaming Lord Sutch, and I think they were kind of remembering early days more so. And I do remember I knew who he was, and I knew that he'd been quite a sort of alternative figure in his day, with songs like Jack the Ripper and Vampire Mary. So there was a horror theme to his music, and actually the night was billed as a night of horror rock. It was a Halloween night, so it was the Cramps, the Meteors, Screaming Lord,
Barhouse and stuff like that. They
Bauhaus really kind of hit their stride, I think.
yeah.
But I remember Screaming Lord Such was brought on in a coffin by this and performed his first song from inside the coffin, and everyone thought this is fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And then they made the fatal mistake of getting out, and I saw this kind of middle-aged, portly gentleman, just a little bit disappointing visually, and it kind of went downhill. No, he's booed off stage, basically.
Oh God!
What?
Yeah.
I love the dedication though, because I saw a clip of Peter Murphy not long back, and he was hanging upside down on stage whilst he was singing, like bat style. I was, man, that's next level dedication, like performing a full song upside down.
That's very impressive. I saw Bauhaus.
How should he pass out though?
Yeah, well, he's probably not. He's probably on something. But
Yeah.
I saw Bauhaus once in their original form, and that would have been about 1983, probably.
Right.
At the I think it was the Adelphi Theatre in the Strand. And they did 2 nights there, and I know that the front rows of the theatre were torn out. It was a seated venue, but of course nobody was going to sit down.
Yeah.
The place in front, just remove the seats as you do. Obviously.
That must have been great. I caught him not long back with they brought David J back to do a tour with him.
That's right.
I caught him in Manchester. I think it was a couple of years ago, which was that was pretty cool. He's still got it, Peter Murphy.
Yeah, I saw them. Where was it now? It might have been Peterborough or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And of course, I had tickets to go and see them at Alexandra Palace earlier this year. Of course, I had to be cancelled and postponed to next year. But yeah, the original lineup, which has been fantastic to see. Well, hopefully, still will be fantastic to see.
So many bands like that. Watching even like the early Cure, like early Cocteau Twins, Sisters of Mercy back in the day with the original lineup. You lived through it all anyway, and yeah.
Well, also,
jealous.
You could be nonchalant about it. It's just like, this is Mercy playing. Shall I go? No, probably not. You could just thought that all those bands would be around forever, but of course they weren't.
Yeah.
But one of the surviving bands up until only really a few years ago, I suppose about 10 years ago, was Susan the Banshees, who carried on through good sort of three decades, doing great stuff, and the shows were always really good as well. And you kind of just thought they would never ever end, but of course all good things do.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. And Nick Cave carried on, obviously, but he's changed a lot in music-wise compared to what he released with the Birthday Party.
Well, I was lucky enough to see the Birthday Party in its first incarnation, and that would have been about 1980, I think 1981, and they performed at a tiny little venue in West Hampstead called the Moonlight Club, which probably held about 100 people, with that, just below a pub. And we just saw it advertised. It was just literally just a quick walk down the road. And so, we saw this amazing show, really low ceiling, very hot and sweaty. It was that original lineup, and it was fantastic, though. And they had just, I think they just released the Bats. So.
Yeah.
But yeah, amazing, though.
That's pretty cool. That's mental. I was going to say then that I don't know if it's just from my perspective, but in my personal opinion, is that with bands, I think they run on a shorter duration now than what they previously did, because there's such a demand and need to be constantly releasing stuff over and over and over again. And then everything else that now comes with being in a band, like the social media side of it, and basically having to have some sort of PR degree to be able to have a functioning band. I think that lifespan wise, it's so much shorter than what it used to be. We had bands that last 10 to 15 years. Now it's 5.
Yeah, I think it used to be more grassroots in many ways. I mean, the bands would cut their teeth, on small gigs, supporting other bands, and just work their way up. So, I mean, it would take a while for them to gain an audience, without the internet, of course. So, without social media. So it was very much a word of mouth thing in many ways. And, you relied on a few, John Peel, of course, was so intrinsic to the whole punk scene. You can't emphasize that enough, really. And Anne Nightingale's program also introduced bands that, you wouldn't have heard otherwise. So, I mean, the first time I heard Season of Banshees was on a Sunday afternoon on a radio program, and I would not have heard them otherwise, though. Blondie also, had their first, to Shreds, I think, first came on a Sunday afternoon radio program. Nobody would have heard that otherwise, though. So, those radio programs were really important in promoting the bands, and and the music press, of course. You relied on those to kind of give you information and feed you stuff. And, I think they struggled to keep up with the pace of change which was happening at that time, because, a lot of stuff happened within a very short period of time, period of about 7 years, 1976 through to, 1982. So, you went from punk rock to goth very, very quickly. And if you think of that timeline now, and all the bands that happened at that time, that's quite an amazing shift culturally.
Yeah,
100%.
Absolutely.
So going back to some of the artists that I wasn't going back to.
Yeah.
That.
Oh, we're going back to golf then.
No. I could go on about it forever, but yeah, I'm just going to get more jealous when you keep mentioning more bands. So yeah, I'll shut down from that. Yeah, going back to some more of the artwork that you've done. You've done one of my favourite, like recent-ish, sort of like an indie film, House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh yeah. That was that at that time it was interesting because the I guess it's to do with desktop publishing in many ways. That illustration just fell out of favour very quickly, overnight almost, it seemed, and everybody wanted Photoshop stuff. And so for a period of probably about 10 years, really, I was illustrating still, but nothing that really people would have seen. It was all kind of just jobbing stuff. A lot of cartoon work, publishing stuff, book covers, magazine work, but little of it was horror or genre work. But fortunately, I was introduced to Tartan Films through a mutual friend who had just started working there, and I hit it off with Hamish McAlpine, who was just in the process of producing his first film, Geen, about Ed Gein, and so I did some kind of rough ideas for a poster of that, none of which we used. It didn't matter because we made contact at that point.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I found myself doing, a lot of their VHS covers and posters. I mean, I did loads of quads for them and loads of VHS covers, and obviously DVD as that kind of emerged. And virtually all of it is Photoshop stuff, adapting other artwork, or perhaps sometimes having to photograph stuff myself to add into other existing elements. For instance, we did a poster, and I think it was just VHS and might have been DVD, very early DVD at the time, audition, and the image they had was so blurry, so I had to do a huge amount of retouching on the girl's face, and I just knew the hand with the syringe just was so blurry, it just looked rubbish, especially blown up onto a quad poster. So I hired a sort of very nasty looking syringe from this props company. It's glass and steel, and because the office was in middle of Soho, just nipped down to the local S&M Emporium and bought this kind of PVC glove and the silicone spray. So I got somebody in the studio to one of the girls to wear the glove, and sprayed it, and she held the syringe, and I photographed that and then used that on the poster alongside the original image of the girl. So I mean, it looks, you wouldn't know, it's not the same image, but it's just what you have to do to make things work. So a lot of it requires some ingenuity, because materials would quite often be quite terrible. To make things look good. So that was great. I enjoyed doing it. It was a good 10 years, and then Tartan went the way of Palace as well. They kind of eventually, probably, I think it kind of just got too ambitious, shall we say, and the money just ultimately wasn't there to prop up potential failure. Especially when you go into film production, you can lose a lot of money quite quickly. But yeah, so that was a good period. But towards the end of that period was when House of a Thousand Corpses was released, and originally I suggested doing an illustration, something which would kind of be more akin to like a freak show poster, if you like.
Yeah.
So that was the concept, and but literally there wasn't a time, and they weren't prepared to pay the money for my time, which would have been a complex job, and yeah, quite rightly, they knew that I would have to be paid properly for it, and the budget simply wasn't there. So I just went the Photoshop route, but trying to give it the feel of an illustration, as I could, especially in pushing the colours and contrast and everything. So that's how House of a Thousand Corpses happened. And I love the film, of course, as well. I thought it was fantastic. And it would have been great to have done an illustrated poster for that. At some point, I'm sure it will happen. A lot of these films are coming back my way, it seems, with private commissions, from groups in the US, individuals here in the UK. And I'm sure at some point that will be one of the projects that will come up. Well, I hope so anyway. So it'll be a chance to just redress the balance and actually do what I should have done at the time.
Yeah. Well, you could have fooled us in a way, because from that poster, man, it's pretty perfect from a Photoshop perspective as well. It's crazy.
Oh, good. Well, I picked all the good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So I'm curious about this could be a two-part question on this actually. Where first of all, in terms of like a company giving you a brief for a project, what timescales, what do they initially give you to go off? And then the next bit of that is creativity-wise, where do you start? Because obviously there must be something where it goes, I want the composition of this piece of work to look such a certain way. For example, like the Elm Street one with obviously the street and the glove. Is there something where there's a first position you kind of go off to then kind of go, I want it to look such a certain way, or do you just kind of just roll with it, or do multiple drafts?
Yeah, it's probably it's changed over the years, the way that commissioning happens. I mean, when I first started working, there were what I'd call dedicated art directors at companies whose job it was to seek out artists and commission work for posters, book covers, that kind of thing, record covers. That doesn't really happen anymore. But you would get specific briefs sometimes. Sometimes you wouldn't. Sometimes they would just let you trust you on the strength of previous work. For instance, when I did the Evil Dead poster, that generated a lot of interest for VHS cover work, and the trust was that I would deliver something which would, ultimately bring the success that the Evil Dead did. Of course, that's not going to happen, because it's still the film has to be good. And if it's not good, it's not gonna work anyway, no matter what you do, it seems. So what did seem to happen quite often was that a client would actually tell you what they didn't want. So, for instance, with the Nightmare on Elm Street, what they didn't want was an Evil Dead looking thing. What they did want was something completely different. So it was a challenge for me. I mean, I knew I could do it, because I'd done already work which didn't look anything like the Evil Dead, and people just didn't even think it was my work because it looked so different. And I think the Nightmare on Elm Street proved that I could actually take stuff away in a different direction. Which opened up things quite a lot from that point on. But so yes, it was in that instance a question of what they didn't want, which shaped how Nightmare on Elm Street looked. And again, I think by the time Freddy's Revenge happened, they kind of trusted me just to do to use my instincts, and largely, probably going on to the second part, it is instinct generally, and a lot of the ideas could be quite spontaneous. What you'd normally do is watch the film first. I mean, in the 80s especially, you'd probably go to a screening at the cinema. You might sit there with a lot of people, journalists. Sometimes it'd just be you on your own, and you'd watch the film, then come away, and then go back with what you think would be appropriate, an appropriate way to approach the film, and then go from there. I think one of the best instances of a poster where we kind of went in. I went in with a friend. I designed this thing with a friend when we did poster for. Which one was it though? It was when we did the little poster. It was a lampoon of the James Bond gun barrel with the blood.
Yeah.
And what we did, because they were looking for a teaser idea for the film, and they thought the teaser would probably be something which would generate interest ahead of the film. They said, people are going to go and see a Nightmare on Elm Street film, whatever, fans anyway, though. So, they thought they could have fun with some sort of teaser campaign. So we literally just walked into the office and, we just used your VHS player, and we queued up the opening titles for, I think it was literally Dr. No, the very first Bond film. And literally they saw the gun barrel, the blood coming down. We just froze frame saying, instead of the gun, it will be the knives. And they said, fantastic, let's do it. Because the new James Bond films are just about to be released. And they just thought it was such a funny idea. And they knew it would probably piss off, whoever it was, Universal, Warner's, and it did. And they were kind of, the posters went up, and within 2 days, they had a sort of cease and desist. They were told if they didn't take down the posters, that they were prosecuted. And they took down, they were covered over. They weren't taken down, they were covered over. But by that point, it had done its job. And the fact that it popped up in magazines saying, Palace Pictures threatened with legal action, and they print the poster, So it's read in a viral kind of way before viral advertising actually existed, if you like. Yeah. So it certainly did its job. I used to have a whole bunch of copies of that poster, and I sort of gave them away over the years, and I wish I'd kept them now because people, keep saying, have you got any copies? I don't even have the little black and white artwork. I didn't know where that went. It all disappeared. Probably got thrown away. I don't know. But,
No.
Well, all these things, in the time we were doing them, they're all kind of throwaway in a way.
Yeah.
The Evil Dead, we thought that film would, do its run. In 3 months' time, people forget about it, and that would be it. You're on to the next job, and you never expect that. 40 years later, it has become this kind of cult classic. You can anticipate that, and it doesn't happen for every film, but some it does, and you kick yourself afterwards. Though, thinking I should have kept all this material, and lucky I've got that poster here still. Evil Dead.
Yeah. That's how ideas get generated, though, isn't it? You come up with these ideas, and before you know it, you've lost hours and have so many drafts. And
usually, what happens is when you watch a film, it's there'll be something which will leap out quite quickly. For instance, with Freddy's Revenge, that opening sequence was so striking. And then it went downhill once the film started, and there was nothing in the film I could see that I thought would be as exciting as that opening moment.
Yeah,
that's why that became the poster for Freddy's Revenge.
Yeah.
Sequence. But nowadays what tends to happen is I watch a film, you just think about it, maybe watch it twice even, and what happens is it in the sort of moments before you just go to sleep, and when you wake up in the morning. It's when you're not really thinking about stuff, suddenly it will present itself. Yeah. So mostly I do get these kind of ideas that just come to me, and they're almost complete ideas. I know exactly what the composition would be, what the colours will be, how the type will look, and it's almost a fully formed poster. So the idea is to hang on to that moment, trying to remember what it is, and then just try and recreate it as best you can. And those are the posters which I think always work the best, because they are spontaneous. They come from within inside, and it's all the stuff that's going on in my head, all the years of watching stuff, and all the other influences that come in, and it just just happens. It's like a ping, and it's suddenly there.
I love the. I always read about people's creative process, and half the time it's whenever they sit down and try and get something down, it never hits them. But as soon as they go for a walk or go for a shower, it pops up in their head.
No, I try and go swimming as much as I can, because that's actually it's like sensory deprivation. So there's nothing there except for what's going on in your head, and stuff comes quite often when I'm swimming. Walking, you're right there. I've got blessed with a big common at the end of the road, Tooting Common, and it's got some great wooded areas where you can just get away from everything, and stuff will come then sometimes as well. But it literally is the waking moments, and sometimes I'll dream a poster, and then you have to try and hold on to that, hold on to your dreams, they say. So on rare occasions, I have sort of woken up in the middle of the night and written down a quick little note.
Yeah, I was gonna say when.
But if the idea is strong, it just stays with you and lingers anyway. So yeah, it's spontaneous, and also you have to trust your own instincts and judgment as well. And as I say, it always ends up being the strongest stuff. So, but really, you're kind of getting a glimpse into my mind when you look at the poster.
Cool.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Be afraid, as they say.
Do you get, so for example, with the Elm Street 2 poster, obviously it's quite a big shot of Freddy. Do you get any like shots of Robert Englund, or is it just freehand? You just do it in whatever position? And
Yeah, well, nowadays you tend to get a screener. It'll be just like a Vimeo link, or you'll get some sort of link, and you can do screen grabs, which are quite good quality. If the film's good enough quality, you get good reference material. Back then, it would be literally a set of press stills, which quite often be black and white photographs, and sort of sheets of transparencies, 35mm transparencies, which are always duplicated on, so they're always a bit blurry and a bit rubbish anyway, though. So you'd have to rely on a mix of stuff, and occasionally I would have to literally take photographs off a TV screen of a frozen frame on a video. And if you ever try to freeze frame a video, it's just terrible.
Yeah.
But that's how I had the image of Heather for Night on Elm Street. Literally, I just so patient. I just kept freeze framing the shot of her sleeping until literally one sort of moment of freeze framing, it wasn't juddering all over the place. So literally just took that picture there and then, and that was the only one of all the shots I took that I could actually use.
Oh wow!
So literally, I had I've actually even got the very device here somewhere. Yes, here you go. This little thing. It's you can put your slide in there and you just hold it up to the light, and so you could literally. I was holding it up to the light with one eye and trying to draw.
Oh my god!
Oh, wow!
I know.
That's insane.
Things you have to do.
Oh my god.
So nowadays, are you working with? Is it Arrow Video? From what I've read, with some of the re-releases that I've done. Yeah.
I've not done anything with them since the beginning of the summer. The last thing I did for them was something called Bloodstone. Greek director. In fact, I did Blood Tide, Bloodstone, and The Wind, it was called as well. Sort of three films, same director. I've not done anything since. However, I'm doing work with Second Sight and 88 Films and another company called Fabulous Films as well.
Yeah.
So I'm really busy at the moment. Though the lockdown has been quite good for my type of work.
Yeah.
In many ways. I mean, I work as a sort of solitary individual, if you like. So the pandemic hasn't really affected me because I was already in isolation, if you like, 40 years. So I have been in lockdown. But also home entertainment is fulfilling its more urgent need, shall we say, at this moment when people have more time and can go to the cinema and stuff. Streaming is obviously one thing, but people are still buying physical stuff. It's just they're not going to shops now to buy it. They have to buy it over the internet mostly. So that's still ongoing. I've been doing a lot more private commission stuff as well over the last summer. So I have an individual who's commissioned a number of pieces from me already. The very last thing I did for him, I posted for Jules. That's one of his favourite films.
I think I've seen that. Is that on your website?
It is, yes.
Yeah, it looked fantastic.
On there now, yeah. Which it's one of those things you're a bit frightened about doing because it's one of those classic films that has some really intense fans out there that you're easily going to disappoint so many people by whatever you do, and you have to kind of just think, just focus on what you want to do and try to ignore what you anticipate will be the chatter out there.
Yeah.
Fortunately, most people seem to like it. In fact, I don't think anybody's actively disliked it, so that's been good. But I've just done a commission for Hellraiser as well, which
wow,
quite sort of a major film in the sort of the horror canon. And again, approaching that was a dream poster as well, and it just came to me, and I just knew exactly what I was going to be doing with it. But also, I watched the film about 3 times in a row. I have to admit, I wasn't a bigger fan of the film as I probably should be at the time. But when I looked at the film again, looking for those little moments which are not, so well known, I actually found it to be a much richer film. And as soon as you get away from the Cenobites, as long as you stop focusing on Pinhead, which everybody else does, trying to remove that from the equation, then you realise it's actually so much more. And also what I like about Hellraiser is it's quite grubby as well. It's set in this nasty little house up in North London, and everything's just it's peeling wallpapers, and it's just cold and miserable looking, and everybody's just got these horrible clothes and horrible hair. And it's just quite fascinating because it's just literally you just feel dirty after watching it. So I've done this poster. It's a private commission for a group, but the arrangement will be that when the group have their own limited edition screen prints, then I'll be able to run off some A3 copies. And a friend of mine bought the artwork off of me. It's his favourite film, and the idea was I was going to hand over the artwork in a tube outside the house where they shot Hellraiser, which is in Cricklewood Lane up in North London.
Right.
The lockdown made that a little bit difficult to do, so we just had to go to a pub in the West End instead. But anyway.
Have you ever been approached by these companies and they're doing like reissues of horror soundtracks like Mondo or Waxwork Records, where they'll have like special commission printing of, like, for example, Nightmare on Elm Street or The Exorcist and stuff like that, where they've had like this unique artwork just for this reissue? Have you ever been approached for something like that?
Well, aside from the Death Waltz stuff, I did a number for Death Waltz. The last thing I did was, as they were part of Mondo, was the Evil Dead reissue soundtrack, which it entailed two quite lavish illustrations. Recently, I have just done a soundtrack for Zombie Flesh Eaters, a new cover for that, for an Italian company, which I think I had an idea they might be releasing it for Halloween. I've not shown it to anybody yet because it's sort of confidential piece of artwork. Yeah, of course. Then of course I did some recent stuff for Demon Records. We did the Vault of Horror, which was the Gates of Hell trilogy. So that entailed about 4 quite involved illustrations. And we're doing another Vault of Horror Italian collection LP as well, which would be a sort of compilation image of all the various films represented on the soundtrack. Other than that, nothing actually at this moment is in the schedule other than that, but these things kind of come along. So at this moment in time, and for the last 5 years, I've not actually actively been looking for work because it's just been coming in.
Yeah,
great. So for me, it's a question of just making sure I have the time to do everything and try and fit things within the deadline as well, though. So the schedule currently is taking me up till February next year. It looks like the amount of work. I have to be realistic about what can be achieved in within time, and so you juggle with deadlines. That one job might be needed in 2 weeks, another one gives you a month, another one might be 3 months down the line. And sometimes, the clients will actually try to shift their deadlines to accommodate me doing the artwork for them, which is great when that happens, of course.
Yeah.
So I've been very, very fortunate in that respect, and largely the work has been stuff that I've been really enjoying doing as well, though. So I feel quite lucky. I mean, it's a very different position to the one I was in 40 years ago, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Is there a preference of the amount of time you like to have? Because I know we're musicians, us 3, and I know sometimes a deadline like way far away is too much freedom. Sometimes the limitations are quite nice.
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. Yes, that can be a problem. Because the thing is, though, when you do a job, you're the way you approach it is very much of that moment. That actually, 2 months down the line, you might actually approach something in a completely different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so sometimes you do look back and you think, God, I wish I'd done this so much differently. But it's too late. Then you have to accept what you do is what you do at that time, and just, let it go as such. So you don't carry that kind of burden with you. But also that's part of the whole learning process for me anyway. Though you kind of look back and you see the flaws in your work and you learn from those, and that affects the way you approach the next job. But mostly I'd say that things usually happen within 2 months. So when I'm approached to do a job, it's usually that you'd expect you'd have done the job within that 2 month period. So often people ask me, can you do this within the next 2 weeks? And the answer is usually going to be no. A month I can probably do that because I can shift stuff around. So you do kind of move things, to try and accommodate as much as you can. But things, once you're on a job, it happens quite swiftly. You spend probably a day, maybe 2 days looking at the material over and over again, coming up with the ideas, doing your sketches and layouts. And then at the approval stage, it's literally anywhere between 2 to 5 days. And at the end of that time, 5 days to me is too long to spend on something. It's also because much like music, you lose the spontaneity then, and
absolutely,
and it becomes quite quickly. So for me, it's important to work very, very fast, and I want to get stuff done within 2 days or 3 days maximum if I can. Very complex jobs will take longer simply because it's more like doing 3 or 4 jobs in one go.
Yeah,
you just literally cannot do stuff that fast. A good example of that would be. I did a piece called, which is for a documentary called "In Search of Tomorrow," which is about 80s science fiction films, and the brief required images from things like RoboCop, Terminator, scanners,
scanners.
There was a good sort of I'd say 10 films had to be represented in there. And there's no way you could get all that portraiture in there and all the stuff you need to get in there in the space of 3 days. So that took 6 days to do, simply because the amount of work, and that's the longest I've spent on anything I think ever. However, the result is actually quite a nice piece of work. I feel quite proud of it. Normally, I hate everything I've just done, but I'm for that one because I think it worked quite well.
I saw the documentary In Search of Darkness, and you did the artwork as well for that, didn't you?
That's right.
Yeah. That was pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that was again another one with lots of imagery in it, which took longer to do. But I think I had to kind of better that in many ways, because I look back at that piece now, and I just see the flaws in it.
Yeah.
So for In Search of Tomorrow, I knew I had to really go beyond what I did for that one. And hopefully, I managed to do that.
Have you done part 2? Because they're just releasing the part 2, aren't they? Of the In Search of Darkness.
Yeah, I've actually done some pieces of work for that. I don't know how they're going to be used at this moment in time. The idea was there would be with some key people they brought back in to do interviews. They were going to do character posters.
Right.
And I think there's a couple artists, maybe 2 or 3 artists working on those. I've done my 3. Literally, it's a picture of the person, and the brief was they'd be holding some VHS covers with key film career. I didn't have much time, and I was very, very busy, so I was trying to look for ways of making it a bit quicker. There wasn't ways of making it a bit quicker at all, other than I just say that. Fine, so we're not looking at images on the front of the covers. That makes life a lot easier. And then I just have to create the title treatments on each of those.
Yeah.
So I've done 3 characters anyway. I don't know how confidential it is at the moment, so I won't say anyway. They're well known characters anyway, though, and they're quite simple. But the point is they are just portraits in many ways. The hands are part of the expression of the way they're holding the covers. You can, all I could do really was just imbue it with the kind of feel of the kind of 80s VHS covers I did at the time. So in a way they're kind of quite crude pieces, but that's really part of why they have to look like that as well, though, because they are a reference to that period. I don't know what they're going to do with them yet, because I think they originally wanted a VHS shop in the background of each one, and I just thought, well, that's actually quite a big, tall order.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I actually said no. I said it's not going to happen. So I think the compromise was going to be they were going to do some sort of digital type thing and then introduce that into the background. So I'm not seeing what they've done yet.
Have you watched the documentary?
I saw the first documentary, in its original. Yeah,
I finished it off the other day after it's about 4 hours in length.
I watched it in one sitting because I thought I must. It's all. I didn't feel there was a huge amount of new information having lived through that era as it was. Although I think for anybody who was probably just a kid at the time, it probably does give them a lot more background that perhaps they wouldn't know otherwise. So, and it's great seeing all those faces on the screen as well. Anyway, I mean, I think there are people who probably wouldn't have given interviews maybe 10 years ago about the subject matter, but are actually more happy to do that now, simply because also, conventions are such a big thing for a lot of the actors now that, and they understand what their fan base is, and so for instance. Somebody like Jeffrey Combs, who's such a great actor, he's done such a variety of stuff, and he goes to Star Trek conventions and just earn loads of money because of the Star Trek work he's done.
Yeah.
But for me, and horror fans, we always think of Reanimator and all the stuff he did at that time.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's fantastic stuff, and I think he well knows that that's very important for people. So he's very, very happy to talk about part of his past. I mean, to him, it's not really the work he does now, but it's very important. He knows that you kind of honour that legacy, I guess, for a new generation of fans.
Yeah, going back to what you're saying, obviously with conventions, I think within the past decade, there's been a massive resurgence within like the horror community in particular, especially when it comes to the conventions, but also going back to, like we say, with our whole vinyl re-releases of different soundtracks, re-releases like Blu-ray, 4K releases, and all these different box set collections of all these 80s horror films, 70s horror films, and obviously, for example, your artwork is a big part in that, because for me, when I'm looking at buying one of these re-releases again, obviously I'm not buying it just because they're releasing it again in like what 4K. Obviously that's part of it, but I want to see some different alternative artwork on there and some good artwork.
Yeah.
And it relates to like the sort of vinyl resurgence as well. But for me, when I collect my records, it's more the artwork that catches my eye first. And that's the reason I'd pick it out, or even like own a piece of like record, compared to like going buying a CD, for example. If you open up a record and you see all the inside of like a gatefold record, you know what I mean? That's what I buy it for. That's part of the experience, apart from listening to it. And I picked up a thing not long back, a Laserdisc version of Halloween. And I thought that was awesome, just seeing the original cover on the front, and inside they had an alternative cover of Michael Myers against the wardrobe with all the different scene listings in there. And I don't even have a Laserdisc player. Like, I can't find one, but I happily collect them just for that reason.
No, I can understand that. I mean, I buy stuff, quite randomly, and it's just because I'm a fan myself anyway, though. So I'm always on eBay buying stuff I really don't need and don't have space. There's a compulsion which is there. You have to own part of it, and actually, going back to my own past, I guess all the things that influenced me when I was a kid. I still find myself on eBay late at night and looking for things to do with things like the Monsters TV show, or all this older stuff, the Addams Family. There were such important programs for me at the time, and to just get a little bit of what that original thing was, stuff that really inspired you at the time. It's quite important because it gives you that link to the past. And for me, I think it's essential to retain the spark, that brought you to the place you are now.
Yeah.
Actually just keep carrying that torch, because it's where you go to when you're kind of stuck for inspiration, almost, if you like. You try to remember what it was that excited you years ago when you were a kid. What was the appeal? What was it about that stuff that you found so exciting? And if you can retain that and actually bring that back, then it just adds a little bit more energy to what you're doing. And I'm doing it constantly. I really am. And it's also in the music taste as well. I mean, I do go back to the music from the 80s and 70s, late 70s, because it still energizes what I do. Again, it's because you want to retain that spark that actually just made you actually do what you do.
Is there anything, any horror films in particular, or even like bands that you would have loved to work with or love to work with right now?
Well, in some ways, I've kind of achieved that by doing work with The Damned.
Yeah.
An album cover for them. But working on that, I don't know if you saw the poster for the Night of 1,000 Vampires, as it was billed for last year, where they took over the Palladium Theatre in London and tried to break the world record for the most amount of people dressed as a vampire in one location. They actually performed an entire show there as a theatrical experience in conjunction with Hammer Films. So they were, within the set design, they were projecting stuff from all the great Christopher Lee films, various vampire films. They had a set which was loosely based on the Egyptian Avenue entrance at Highgate Cemetery, for instance, as well.
Yeah.
They had images of Whitby Abbey, and they also did it in conjunction with the Circus of Horrors, who performed on stage as part of the whole thing as well. So you had the Damned delivering a Damned show with all their back catalogue, and then you had all this visual stuff going on as well. So it was all, this whole big, amazing experience. And of course, the thing which kind of blew everybody's mind away was, Dave Vanian was kind of seemed to be channeling Bela Lugosi in the first part, and then a bit of Christopher Lee. And then there was an interval, and he'd shaved his head completely, and did perform the second half as Nosferatu with the big ears.
Shaved it in the interval?
What?
Yes, they completely shaved his head in the interval.
That's brilliant.
Honestly, you can look it up on YouTube. Look for The Damned, Night of 1,000 Vampires, or the Palladium Theatre. You can see images of him. Because at first, when he came on stage, I thought, wow, that's pretty convincing as a bold wig. Looking for the joins, there weren't any joins. And suddenly realised, my God, he's actually shaved his head. That's dedication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine if it's a quick turnaround. It was like he just went backstage.
Not just shaving the head, it's also making sure you don't cut it at the same time, but also then to do a full makeup as well.
That's insane.
I love that.
But they had a little after show party at a place called Quo Vadis in Soho, and so I was there with some friends, and I was actually sat with Caroline Munro, and who'd obviously been Dracula AD 72, and Pauline Pert, who'd been in she was in Satanic Rites of Dracula. So it's great to have that little vampire Hammer link there.
Yeah.
And I went to the toilet, and as I was coming out of the toilet, suddenly Dave Vanian was there in his full Nosferatu makeup with the ears and everything.
No.
What?
Thank you so much. What? This is Dave's in Nosferatu. What's going on here? That was a little surreal moment.
Crazy.
And I had washed my hands, so this one.
It's insane.
Have you heard about the Crowbar in London shutting the doors?
It's shutting, is it? Is that as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, they're closing, unfortunately. Yeah.
I must admit, I didn't go in there that often. I had been in there, and it was always great fun. But yes, that would be terrible to see that go. I mean, it's quite a big place, isn't it? Once you get inside, I mean, you've got the whole area at the back.
like a TARDIS, isn't it?
It is. No, exactly. Now, did you know what it used to be before it was the crowbar?
No.
No?
It was called La Rue's. It was owned by Danny LaRue. Now, do you know Danny LaRue? He was one of the most famous drag artists ever. One of the biggest, highest paid performers in the world in the 1960s. And he had his own TV show. So it's basically, it was drag when drag was still bizarrely this kind of acceptable thing for Saturday Night TV.
Yeah, that's mad.
Anyway, again, go on Google and search him out. But anyway, he owned that bar, and it's just quite funny how it went from La Rue's to the crowbar.
The crowbar, yeah.
Away.
Yeah, I guess we'll get on to it now then. What's your favourite scary movie?
Well, it's one of those things that's going to change, isn't it, from day to day, hour to hour.
Yeah.
If you're talking about films that genuinely disturbed me, there have been. And I think the film that disturbed me more than any other I've ever seen, I've never watched the scene again, it was in The Green Mile, which is not really a horror film as such, but the plot execution was really, really upsetting, I thought. And I just couldn't sleep for days afterwards. So it just really, really disturbed me because, I invested a lot in what was going on in the film. And, it just seemed torturous and just really upsetting. So I rewatched the Quake recently, the Norwegian earthquake film.
I don't know if I've seen that.
Okay, I recommend it. It's you can find it on I think it's Netflix or it might be Amazon Prime, one of the two.
Yeah,
it's called The Quake, Norwegian film. It's kind of like a sequel, I guess, to another film called The Flood. Same actor, same family, and there is like a sort of the films do relate to each other. But literally, I've literally was grabbing the seat, and it was so tense. Honestly, tension in that film is unlike anything I've experienced before. So I recommend that, The Quake.
Oh, yeah, I'm definitely going to be putting that on.
Things I've seen, all the films I've seen at the Fright Fest, you watch so many horror films, it's very hard to actually find yourself, kind of being frightened, I guess, though. It's, you kind of, because you know the filmmaking process and you understand, how things are made, and it's very hard to remove yourself and actually see something, with fresh eyes in many ways. But I have to say the Babadook I thought was really effective, and actually that did kind of make me think of when I was a kid watching horror films, which used to look through my fingers like this.
Yeah.
Going, oh no, don't do that, don't do that. Actually had that effect on me. So of course I know other people saw just thought, what was that all about? It wasn't frightening at all. But I guess it's what you carry with you and what you remember as a kid, things that frighten you. Those things just hang around in your head, and things get triggered, I guess, though, and nerves can be touched, and so I think things that frighten me probably are reminding me of things that frightened me as a kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So is there standout film for yourself, or that you can continue going back to without being disappointed?
Oh yeah, many of them. And mostly they're quite silly ones, by most people's from judgment. I mean, one of my favourite Hammer films, because I love all the Hammer films anyway.
Yeah.
Those endlessly, and I do still. But one of the standout ones, I think, is the Lost Continent. And if you mention this to people, most people haven't even heard of it. It's one of those odd ones. It was made after, I guess, in The Devil Rides Out was quite a successful film for Hammer. And it was, Mark's sort of departure from the costume gothic stuff. Yeah. And they tried to recreate the success of that and the feel of it with another Dennis Wheatley story. So The Lost Continent it is a Dennis Wheatley story, again like The Devil Rides Out, and has some occult elements in it. It doesn't have the devil, for instance, but what it does have is the Spanish Inquisition. Bizarrely, although it's a contemporary setting, as contemporary as 1970, whatever it was, would be. Yeah. But suddenly you have this galleon with the Spanish Inquisition on it, though. And you have to see it to believe it. It's quite unbelievable. It has some terrible monsters in it as well. Monsters. But some fantastic character actors in it. I mean, it is extraordinary. And as the poster boasts, man-eating sea kelp, and that alone is worth the ticket price, I'd say.
So what did you think of, because we've got this film in our upcoming, we're doing like a horror fest thing at the moment on our YouTube channel and the podcast itself, where we're just talking about different horror films for every week. And the upcoming one is Dracula. We're going to be talking about
Which
the Bram Stoker's Dracula from the 90s. What did you think of that one?
For Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
Long extended title. Well, it's interesting. I did go to the cinema to see it, and there are moments in it which I absolutely love. I mean, I loved the whole Gary Oldman drinking absinthe. I mean, Dracula drinking absinthe. When did that happen, though? But it's such a bizarre, funny moment, though.
Yeah.
And I love the castle, the design of the castle. I love the costumes, especially Gary Oldman's, Klimt costume at the end, the little gold kind of.
Yeah.
It was also very, very silly, I found, as well. The acting just seemed, kind of completely flowery and theatrical. And I remember a lot of people just laughing at the cinema at some of the delivery of the lines. And weirdly, it's kind of not unlike the tone of the original novel in many ways. It's quite florid in parts. And so kind of it kind of has some of the essence of the original novel, I think, which is quite interesting to see. There was an attempt to actually bring back some of that original Bram Stoker, kind of a sense of time and place. But it's one of those films I don't know. I've seen it several times, and I don't feel any urgency to watch it again. However, I'll always go back to the 1958 Hammer Dracula because I love it. It's a very simple film. It's very cheaply made, and that shows now. But it's still got something which is quite visceral about it. I mean, the whole, once Dracula transforms and he is this kind of vampire, it actually becomes quite feral, and it still has a very unpleasant kind of feel to it, I think. Which one of the reasons I love the Hammer films is because when you understand the period of time in which each one was made, you can understand they're trying to break taboos as they go along. And that's probably why they were universally loathed by film critics as they came out, because people just were offended by them. Just thought they were just like, it's like gutter cinema as far as they were unpleasant for no other reason than being unpleasant. And well, I suppose there was an attempt to do that. Of course, there was an exploitation element to them, but as you see, as you watch them from the 1950s through to the 1970s, when they kind of finally entered that whole cycle, you can see how they've tried to address cultural change as it went along, and just pushing the boundaries a little bit further each time. So you go from this quite sort of staid, very English kind of way of being, through to this whole kind of let's throw in as many breasts as possible into the whole lesbian vampire cycle they did, the Constantine cycle. And it is quite interesting how they did that. And then of course, one of the final films was To the Devil a Daughter, where they really went back to some sort of satanic content, I guess, trying to keep up with the sort of the films that The Exorcist spawned. And they tried to compete with that, which of course they just couldn't do, because they were still very much tied to this kind of house kind of style, if you like, though. And it's very difficult to break out of that, I think, though. And you can see why that whole cycle ended ultimately. But what's interesting now is there's been a reappraisal of some of those later Hammer films. So like the two last Dracula films, AD 72 and Satanic Rites of Dracula, are now seen with fresh eyes and a whole different perspective. And the fact we still have Caroline Munro with us, and Pauline Purty popped up in Satanic Rites of Dracula. I mean, the fact they're still around means that fans can have that direct link through meeting them as well. Get a sense of time and place. And Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell, it's one of those ones which kind of, I just hit at the wrong time. I think people have moved so far away from those gothic horrors at that moment, 73, that it kind of just felt out of time, out of place. But when you look at it now, actually, it's quite a powerful film. It really is really transgressive in many ways. I mean, this whole scene where the monster, bizarre makeup as it is, it's Darth Vader underneath there. Digging his own grave with somebody else's, grave marker, and it's just this kind of weird, bizarre desecration scene, which just looks so unpleasant in the film. And so it's got these kind of lovely, subtle things. In fact, after my experience working with Richard Stanley on the Island of Dr. Moreau, and really getting into the whole, substance of Dr. Moreau and what he was trying to achieve within the original story, and also to an extent within the films, you kind of realise that actually Frankenstein and Monster from Hell is pretty much the Island of Dr. Moreau. The island being the asylum, Frankenstein is Moreau, and he's trying to build, life from these bits of other life, if you like, and experimenting and using vivisection and such like, and it's like a parallel thing. In fact, even the end sequence where the monster's torn to pieces by the inmates, it's kind of echoes that moment in The Island of Lost Souls, the Charles Lawson film, where Moreau is confronted by his own creations. They kind of tear him to pieces. So there are kind of interesting parallels there, which I think it's worth exploring if you want to kind of get the full effect of the film. Because there are references there. They're not overt, but they are there, and I think that's what is quite interesting about those films.
It's like when you go back to the say like Universal Frankenstein, when he's obviously played to be this sort of villain character, but when you look at it from a different perspective, it's actually kind of sad. Same with the creature from the Black Lagoon as well.
Yeah.
I know what you mean.
Misunderstood people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyone to be loved.
So should we get on to our next segment?
Just a quick one. Obviously, you mentioned Exorcist then, and obviously it's coming to like recent news that they're going to be rebooting The Exorcist, and they're going to be potentially rebooting Elm Street, with it now not being owned by the Michael Bay company that it was owned by originally. So now the Wes Craven Estates now got it back. What's your actual thoughts on the fact that they're going to be rebooting? Do you think they should be left alone, or do they want another reincarnation of head spinning and finger gloves and everything else?
Well, I think when a film is powerful and it works, I don't think there's any need to go back. I think you have to really bring something new to make something work, and it rarely happens. In my experience of reboots, I've not seen the remake of the first remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. I haven't seen that at all.
Oh.
You're not missing out.
Yeah, you're not missing much.
I have seen the remake of The Evil Dead, which I guess is
good.
That was good, quite good, yeah.
Well, I liked it. I have to say, I went to the cinema expecting just to be really annoyed, but in fact, actually, it had quite a fresh, a new approach to the film. It was different in texture and tone, so they had tried to do something different with it, and I think they achieved it. And actually, it's just quite funny to have that little last moment, with Bruce Campbell turning around.
Yeah.
But I thought that was great because at least that did acknowledge that there was a legacy going on there, but they were definitely trying to do something different, and I was quite impressed by that. I remember being really annoyed because what really, I'm talking about being peeved, weren't we, one day? What peeves me are terrible remakes of foreign language films, which generally are American remakes, and I just think, why? Can you not read? Do you have to remake this with Americans? Why are you doing this? Like, when the film is perfectly fine as it is.
Yeah.
And so one of the films I expected to really hate was the remake of Let the Right One In.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I thought, well, they simplified the title already, so they're obviously going for a less informed audience in many ways. And of course, it was Hammer who were behind that as well, which kind of I thought, well, Hammer is essentially a brand name now, but they're not an active film company as such in the way they were. So I expected to hate it, and actually I was really surprised at how good it was. And actually, I think it stands up as well as the source material, and I just see them as two different films. It's the same story essentially, but the tone and texture is quite different between the two, and the dynamic between the characters is quite different as well, I feel. And so I can watch either of those films as standalone films and enjoy both of them completely independently and not have to relate the two together at all.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely the thing with reboots in general, where a lot are being rebooted where they're still having an impact to this day. For example, I've seen recently a lot of YouTube channels doing reaction videos to watching The Exorcist for the first time, and it's still having an impact now. Than obviously not to the extreme as what it was back in the 70s, but it still has a reaction where they're like, "Whoa, this just happened!" Like the scene where the Father Karras sees his mother on the bed. Instead, it's the white room, and it's all creepy as fuck. And it shows that it still has an impact. So there's always that idea of why should it be redone when it already still has a message and it still works.
The little moments as well, like when the mother's in the attic, she's looking around with a candle, and you expect something to happen. Of course, the candle just flares suddenly.
Yeah.
That makes you jump. It's not what you're expecting, but it's an effective jump scare in many ways.
Yeah.
But what was interesting about The Exorcist, it wasn't referencing any other film at all. It wasn't trying to emulate anything else, and it was its own self-contained film. It wasn't being knowing either, though. It wasn't making a nod to its own pretense, if you like. There were no little asides, no little laughs. So it kind of just played it as a straight drama. And because there were, the actors, I mean, there were known actors, but there was nobody you could say was a genre actor, thus making it a horror film vehicle, if you like.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think it works really well, and I think it still stands up today. I have watched it more recently, and I really enjoyed. I know people hate The Heretic, but I really love it still. Very,
Really?
I love it. I love the soundtrack. I love the whole look of it. It's silly in many ways, but I think it's got a sort of a hidden kind of power in there, which I really, I find exciting. And even though you can tell Richard Burton's probably sozzled throughout the whole thing, it's still, it's still great, I think. And I actually quite like that, because he's like this very damaged person, and I think he was in life. It just really comes across in the film. And I loved, Legion, the almost the direct sequel to the first film.
Yeah.
It follows literally word for word the book, the novel as well.
Mm.
And because interesting, novel is so obviously trying not to be a book about an exorcism. It's really, the rumination, the kind of the questions the exorcism brings up, and the sort of how it shakes people's faith and such like, or strengthens it. But it's it's interesting to see how the Gemini killer aspect comes up as well within the novel. And pretty much the film actually captures exactly the book as it is.
Yeah.
Because you get the tagged on stuff which looks stupid, like the exorcism, which isn't part of the novel at all, but just had to be there because people demand an exorcism in a film called The Exorcist.
That creepy as fuck scene where it's just silent, the sound design is silent, it's a white room, it's a really long pan shot, and then all of a sudden like the nurse goes into the room and then walks back out of it and he's there.
Oh my god.
No.
It was a very powerful shock moment. I mean, unlike most shock moments I've ever seen before. And I saw that at a Fright Fest many years ago, and literally all these hardened horror fans screamed. Like, so yeah, it's very effective. And no, was it Arrow put out the UK release, which is supposed to be the full restored director's version, without the silly exorcist moment. Right. But it's interesting, they've gone to some very odd sources for the material, that because I've definitely got a copy of it on DVD, and there are a lot of scenes which they use what looks like a VHS for, where they clearly exist in a better form. So I'm not too sure how that happened, whether it's just literally an issue of licensing that, a company didn't want to let them have their source material, and so they've had to go elsewhere for it. I don't know what happened there, but it just seemed a shame that actually the film exists in its proper form, but now the only way you can see it like that is through this kind of hybrid
cut
version.
together kind of style.
I mean, all you would do is take the original form, cut out the silly exorcism and those bits for the exorcist, and then you've got what essentially is the novel, which is the powerful core of the film. Anyway, but we can but complain, and that's it, Dave.
There's good films such as I mean, I'm not going to say it was good actually. I was going to say the Wicker Man remake and that, but we've had a lot of resurgence again in British folk horror as well. So like Midsummer, for example, still representing that sort of. It's never really disappeared. It's always just been looming in the background. All those British cult sort of horror films, but it seems like they're slowly bringing them back as well.
It's quite powerful stuff because it's when you examine the sort of pagan stuff, it's kind of where we all came from ultimately, and that very powerful. It's like an eternal struggle between paganism and Christianity, and how Christianity took elements of paganism just to kind of make it more palatable for the locals, if you like. So you have this kind of whole witchcraft thing, and then you have Christianity, which also brings along its own miracles and magic, if you like, in a way. And it's like trying to sort out what actually is worth holding on to and what's worth what do you jettison? I don't know, but because we have that very rich, deep history here in the UK, especially Europe, obviously as well. But we have all these amazing places still, churches built over pagan sites. We have that real, literal history here of genuine folk horror, and folk horror is like witch burning, for instance. I mean that all was all real, all happened, and those places largely you can still visit. You can visit squares where they used to burn witches, and for instance, Witchfinder General does actually tread through some of those places where things actually happened as well. I've spent Saturday going to some of the locations for Blood on Satan's Claw this last weekend. All those places are still there, and they look exactly the same as they did in a film made in the 70s, but they probably are exactly the same as they were when they were built originally.
Yeah.
The case of the church, hundreds of years ago, it's like Flint Church, which is essentially a ruin, but they used it in Hammer as the Witches as well, because it's just a great location. And these places are all there to visit. We spent 5 days visiting all the locations from the Wicker Man, and again, those places are all still there. And
whereabouts were they filmed?
It's all pretty much in one place. I'll say one place. They located, or they used one little town as a base. Stewart, it was called. And then everywhere you have to travel, maybe sometimes 20 miles, maybe further. Everything's accessible from there. So there are the gardens with the palms, which literally are a kind of like Victorian folly, if you like, though. It literally is. It has a microclimate, the area. So actually it's a bit like Summer Isle. You can actually grow palms there and exotic fruits and exotic flowers. So it's there's some reality there as it is. The various locations all still standing. It was just quite amazing to go there. They built 2 Wicker Men. I don't know if you know. There was one which is like a part Wicker Man, which is the end scene when you see the head falls off and you see the sunset. Well, obviously they built a second Wicker Man, and just, you can actually see a little piece of metal sticking out of the ground, obviously where a rope was pulled through, so they could pull the head down at the right moment. Set. And there are stumps there where they built that particular prop. And then there's the holes in the ground where the original Wicker Man stood, which is all gone. There's nothing there. We dug deep, actually. In fact, where is it here?
What, you actually dug down just to see if you could get a piece? No way! Did you get a piece?
It's a bit of the Wicker Man.
Oh my god!
No.
Right, boys, we're going digging.
Get the cameras. We're going.
like rotten wood right at the bottom. You literally like arm deep, just scraping around there because everything's gone. Otherwise, it'll be taken away. But it was great seeing, for instance, the scene where it's the climax. He goes into the cave. He's lured into the cave.
Yeah.
Goes up and appears at the top of the cliff, and then is taken up to the Wicker Man. Well, the beach is exactly as it is. The cave entrance is still there. The cave entrance is not a cave. It's like an alcove in a rock.
Right.
So literally, he walks in, and there's nothing else to go to. So he must have hid behind the rock. Cuts to Wookie Hole in Somerset, which was the actual cave they used. So they go through that, and then they cut again to where the Wicker Man is. It's a different location to where the beach is.
Yeah.
But again, when he emerges from the cave, it's not a cave entrance or exit. It's actually just a hole in the ground where he's obviously hiding, and then has to climb up at the appropriate.
That's crazy.
So yeah, it's just you kind of you get a sense of the film craft and the power of editing. You just believe all these things are all one single sequence in many ways, but they're not. They're completely different places.
Oh, there's one place I've been meaning to visit. I've been down in London. I still haven't been there yet. It's where they filmed the Slaughtered Lamb, from American Werewolf in London. Because I know that was in London, and then you've got the actual.
There's two places.
There's one in Wales, isn't there? The actual
exterior in Wales, and then the other places I went to actually the other weekend, which is it's kind of just outside Guildford,
right?
And so you go in, and actually the layout is kind of pretty much there where the pentagram was on the wall was now like a sort of a hole knocked through to go to the other bar. It's just like almost like a window arrangement. But the flagstones are there, the door arrangement's still the same. Where the dartboard was, there's a picture on the wall now, obviously, but the bar's in the same place though. So you get a sense of American Werewolf in London when you go there.
Yeah.
In fact, a friend of mine, when we went to the exterior in Wales, he filmed himself going up to the door as if to go in, but of course it's a private home. You can't just knock on the door and walk in or anything. And then he made sure he was wearing exactly the same clothes. It's like a year and a half later, so he could film himself walking into the pub.
Also, he cut it.
Oh my God!
No way.
That's a perfect idea. That's crazy.
That's amazing.
I like that.
It's very funny, isn't it?
It is crazy. Like, you don't realise how much history there is to places. Like, again, the Whitby Church. That was the inspiration for Bram Stoker writing Dracula. That was part of that. And
actually, when he wrote that, there was still a big central tower, square tower, which it was standing at that time when he wrote the original novel. It's no longer there; it collapsed. But his great grandnephew Dacre Stoker has written a sort of a kind of extension of Dracula, called Dracula, in which one key scene takes place in the tower, which as it would have stood at the time.
Oh wow!
I've seen him coming back because they do the Whitby Goth weekend as well, don't they? Where they have the celebrations down there, and I think he's come back there to actually do some speeches and talks and stuff like that on it for it.
That's why I went to one. Was it last year? I think it was the beginning of last year.
Yeah.
But so it's been great for him because he's doing a lot of research into the writing of the book, and obviously being family, he's had access to family materials which have been sort of boxed up for generations. And
I wonder what's in there.
Interesting materials. I mean, it's all about really Bram Stoker's own life and the sort of thing around him. And he lived in London, as you know, for quite a while. He managed the Lyceum Theatre and little things like in Brick Lane, there's a little road going off of that, which within the novel Dracula places 6 coffins. Basically, he rings London with coffins as places he can go to relocate and avoid detection. And but there are 6 that were taken to Brick Lane. It kind of links slightly into the Jack the Ripper thing as well, though, which happened in the area, because the Ripper murders happened during the period of 7 or 8 years when Bram Stoker was writing Dracula.
Yeah.
And so those kind of fed into some of the ideas within the novel as well. But yeah, there are odd things. For instance, Bram Stoker was a very sickly child, was almost bedridden, and wasn't expected to live. But something happened at some point when he was about, was he about 7 years old? I think something happened, and basically illness went, and he kind of gained a lot of strength.
Became immortal.
He became super athletic, and kind of gained all this incredible knowledge, and it's all put down to this the nurse, the person who's nursing him, which if you could extrapolate from that, was she a vampire? Did she bite him?
Well, in his own weird way, he's achieved his immortality from his books.
That's true, but of course, when Dracula came out, Bram Stoker was well known as the manager of the Lyceum Theatre. I mean, he was well known already before Dracula was published.
Yeah.
And because I didn't realise that he was involved very heavily in the literary scene in London as well, though that he's good friends with Oscar Wilde, and he was the only person who stood by Oscar Wilde when he was jailed. He would go and visit him and remained loyal in his friendship to him when everybody else abandoned him.
Yeah.
But also he knew Mark Twain very well. Mark Twain lived in London for a while, and Bram Stoker was his literary agent for the UK. So it's interesting when you kind of make all these connections. And of course, Henry Irving, the actor, he absolutely adored and admired, which is why he came to London in the first place to work with. Henry Irving's persona. I think he'd whether it's Shylock, I think maybe he was playing on stage, and that kind of became a sort of template for Dracula within the novel as well. So there's all these interesting little markers you can trace around London, and Scotland was another place he spent time in as well. The inspiration for Dracula's castle is a place on the coast in Scotland, which again has been looked at by Dacre Stoker, and there's some sort of weird configuration about the place as well, though, which makes it quite unique. Of course, Bram Stoker never went to Europe at all. He never went to Romania or Transylvania. That was all just stuff he picked up from his research. But interesting name Dracula came from a book which he picked up in the library in Whitby when he's doing some research. Just the name was just there because it was always Dracula.
Yeah.
But then I think it being spelled with an A on the end in this one kind of piece of text, and that's where he knew that was the name he was going to use in the book.
It's crazy how things come together like that.
The library's a fish and chip shop now.
Is it
really?
That's insane.
How things change. Fish and chips.
It's not even a steakhouse, because that would be quite funny, though, wouldn't it? Like, when you steak a vampire, but you never get. But
man, they've missed a perfect opportunity there.
They did.
That would have been a great selling point for visitors to Whitby.
Well, of course, there's another fish and chip collection as well, because where Boris Karloff was born in South London in Peckham.
Yeah.
And the place where he was born is now a fish and chip shop.
What?
Well, you got Frankenstein.
Goddamn British.
Bloody British people and their chips.
Oh man. Yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I don't know if there's any more questions you guys got, or any other topics you want to get on.
There is, but it's way off topic. We did talk about this a while ago, but it was about deciding on colour palettes for films, because we didn't really touch on that.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Again, it's intuitive, quite often it's spontaneous. Mostly it is, when you get those little flashes of images in your head, the layout when it comes to usually comes loaded with its own colour palette anyway. So my job is to try and recreate what I've seen in my head. It doesn't always look exactly the same, and sometimes you have to change it a bit, but generally I do have an idea about how colour should work in something. And again, if I'm directed by a client over colour, which is very rarely, it will usually be, can we not use this colour? It's like, not what colour do they want?
Yeah. Which I suppose is sometimes better because it's going back to the limitations, like we said
Exactly.
earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it creates a little challenge for you to make it your own. Although in some ways it's theirs, but you kind of you wrestle it away from them and make it yours.
Yeah, it seems like this crazy thing to interpret an art form into your own art form, but also, you know, try and make it your own at the same time.
Yeah, but I mean, also my job is to make it appealing to the people who are ultimately going to be, you know, the
Viewing, yeah.
consumers, if you like, though, and almost trying to second guess what people would like to see, and actually also what they don't expect to see. More importantly, because that's, you know, your job is to actually add some element of surprise into the work you do. So you in the same way we're talking about when you repackage a film that's been repackaged so many times, what you have to do is try to give it a new angle, a new kind of life, which wasn't there before. And that's the you know, the challenge I have to keep trying to meet all the time. And that's why you have to look at these films over and over again sometimes, just to almost to ignore the stuff everybody knows and just look for the bits in between. And that's where the key to a new art always lies.
Yeah, picking up the subtleties of what it provides.
Yeah, exactly.
Another thing I did want to ask, which has gone out of my mind very quickly. Typical that, isn't it? This is gone now.
Go on.
Don't do that. That makes it worse.
Is there clues we can give you, though? Is it related to a film? Is it music? Is it
It was
actor?
Oh,
yeah, I remember.
There
now.
you go.
Yeah, you did, it worked. It was about how you approach work now. What is your preference? Is it always you prefer to approach it painting, or is it sometimes, as we've mentioned, the Photoshop route?
Yeah, I don't even consider Photoshop as an option anymore, though, because I mean, other people do it. There are so many artists using digital techniques, and they do it fantastically. I couldn't possibly come up to that standard at all, because what I know is the paint that I use, and because there's so few people now painting. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously, but largely it tends to be acrylic or oil. The paint that I use, very few people use now. I remember having two pieces in a group show, and the other artists were there as well. And one of the other guys came out and said, "Oh, what are you using?" I said, "Oh, I'm using, designer's gouache." She said, "Designer's gouache? Nobody uses that anymore, though." And I said, "Well, I do."
So you're wrong.
You.
Right, I've got one last one because I've realised we've kept you for quite a while now. But I thought I'd wrap up with this, but it's a nice little bow on this podcast. So obviously you've done loads of impressive work over the years, but if you had to put it down to one main one that you really hold close as a piece of work that you've done, which one would you say it is?
Well, in terms of something I'm happy with, or
yeah, I guess. I mean, is there one piece of work that you really like hold close as like your favourite? Would you say?
I try not to do that. Well, the thing is, you know, what I have to do is always keep looking ahead, anticipating better work as I go along. So it's not helpful sometimes to look back unless I'm actually there to just, you know, be self-critical, if you like.
Yeah.
I can see where things have worked and where they haven't worked, and where they have worked, then I'm happy that's happened. But I have to really be a harsh judge in order to improve, if you like, though. But there are pieces that I think that have retained what I wanted them to actually have to start with. And Freddy's Revenge will definitely be one of those, I think.
Yeah.
I'd even say that recent piece I mentioned earlier on, In Search of Tomorrow, I think it is a strong piece, which I think I don't feel that bad about. So the fact I don't feel bad about it actually must be a good thing. And you know, I've got stuff I'm working on at the moment. I mean, I think I've done some of my best stuff in the last this recent lockdown. For instance, I'm very happy with the Dawn of the Dead piece I did, which is a private commission. I feel that achieved exactly what I wanted it to do, and actually sufficiently different to everything else that's gone before to be its own unique piece. And in fact, I'm working on something at the moment, which I don't think I don't have a problem talking about it, because it's ultimately it's going to have to sell, and I think we're looking at teasing it some way anyway, though. So it will be a limited edition poster for the original Hammer Dracula, 1958 Dracula, and which is almost a holy grail in some ways of a job to do. And also, it's potentially a big curse, because everybody has their, again, expectation of how a poster for that film should look, and especially a new poster for that film. So what I've got to do is be true to the film and its original spirit and look, and yet also lift from it something which speaks to another generation, if you like, and tries to create the sort of the excitement that film originally gave to its audience, original audience, and also playing on obviously those two great actors, Chris Lee and Peter Cushing as well, and then trying to bring something that hasn't been seen before without actually adding something which doesn't exist, if you like. And one of the little things I really wanted to do was you get a sort of, there's a map painting of the castle. You only see part of it. You only see literally the entranceway pretty much, and a hint of a turret. Just trying to extend how that should have looked had you seen more of it as well, and bring that into the poster. But I won't say any more than that anyway.
So will you be selling those art prints individually on your website then? Yeah.
Well, initially it's going to be a limited edition print. I think we're looking at maybe screen printing. We're not too sure, full color screen print. And I think the edition will be quite limited, 150 perhaps. I think we're thinking at the moment. Yeah. But I've written into the contracts, and it's licensed with Hammer as well, though. So it's an official licensed item.
Oh wow.
So they have their potential use of it if they want to take it further into other merchandising. That's written into the contract. That's fine. And I've also written in that I want to be able to do A3 prints to sell at conventions or anything as well, though. So so it will be available in some other form. But what I won't be able to do is recreate the full size version that they do, because that has to be a limited edition. Yeah, whatever form it comes in. But anyway, it's going to be a challenge, because I have to make it something that I'm happy with, because I love the film so much, and I want to other people to see what I like about the film and what I do, and also please all the fans out there, all the legions of Hammer fans, young and old, especially the older ones who will be very, very fussy about it, and hopefully not disappoint anybody.
And how long do you have to do that? Do you have a deadline on that?
Well, the sketch is now approved. In fact, it's approved this afternoon. So I'm probably going to make a start on it tomorrow. Actually, not tomorrow. It will be Wednesday, because tomorrow, actually, I'm another exciting day out at another cemetery. I'm going to Reissue Cemetery. Scenes from Future of Blood, and funnily enough, there's a music reference as well, because it's where they photographed the cover for Phantasmagoria, the Damn's album Phantasmagoria. That's Kensington Cemetery as well. Cool. So I'm going to locate that exact little angle they use on the album cover as well, and just take a couple of pictures there. But yeah, that's a fun day out. I do love a cemetery.
No, I went to Paris a couple of years back, and I visited is it Père
Lachaise? Yes, I know.
Yeah, yeah, and I completely didn't even realise Jim Morrison was buried there. Yeah. And then I saw a couple of people around this gravestone. I was like, oh, this is a bit weird. And I went there. I mean, they could have been visiting family, knowing me. I was just being nosy.
You're like going on like, what are you doing?
Yeah, but I looked at it. Yeah, it's literally a small little plaque for Jim Morrison. You walk past and there's all these massive crypts and everything. It looks absolutely beautiful there.
Yeah, Jim
Morrison's got this little spot there.
What's it actually say on there? Does it actually say this is the end? Because it beauty in a way.
Let me have a quick look. Morrison.
There's anticipation now.
Not much of mine.
It better be impressive, that's all I can say.
If it just says Jim Morrison, and that's it.
So maybe it says this is not the end.
So it says. ...
my friend.
I can't read that last bit there. I cut all the silence out on the video.
They down.
I'm trying to find a good photo of it. I was going to try and find mine of it, but it's probably going to take forever. So it says James Douglas Morrison, 1948 to 1971, and it says Kata Ton. I don't know what that says. Cataton. I don't even know. It's something in Latin, I think. Cataton. Animo. I don't even know. I'm not even going to do it. I can't speak Latin.
Very impressive anyway, though.
No.
It didn't say that he was cataleptic. Did it? Anything like that?
No. That's it.
Okay.
Do you think it'd be like?
I'll find out.
Yeah.
I'm just going to Google it. What does it say? Morrison's grave. My Google search will be weird.
But it's just the way how it's like. It's kind of like hidden away. I mean, obviously, you'd think with Jim Morrison it'd be a big, massive grave or something in the middle of all the, especially in that cemetery itself. So I was quite surprised when I saw it.
So it says Google that on his current headstone it bears obviously what he said, James Morrison, and then the Greek inscription Kataton Demone, whatever that is, and then it says its literal meaning is according to his own, which is usually interpreted as true to his own spirit.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, funnily enough, the interior of the Cramps always claimed that when he performed on stage, he was taken over by the spirit of Jim Morrison.
Oh, wow.
I just think of Wayne's World 2. That's all I think of when people say. And they shall come. Did he also have a naked Indian man? Yes.
Right, I think that's a good way.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
This is the end.
Yeah.
We have to play it. That's what
Yeah, thanks for coming on anyway. We really appreciate it.
I know it's been great fun. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that was episode 40, the big 40 with Graham Humphreys. I said that in a very northern way then, didn't I? That was episode 40 with Graham Humphreys.
Yeah, you did. Just to give you an answer.
Yeah.
If you want a less northern version, go listen to our Bristol friends, Just a Girl podcast and Karma Radio, if you don't like the sound of our voice. And if you didn't know, the past 10 episodes we've referred to as the Great White Buffalo, our reference to Hot Tub Time Machine, where it's like, Great White Buffalo, Great White Buffalo. Great, thanks, guys. Great White Buffalo. So have a listen back to him. There's some banging guests, and that's why it was considered our Great White Buffalo.
Great White Buffalo.
So yeah, enjoy them.
And if you haven't already, make sure you check us out on our social media channels at An Earful Podcast. If you don't know what social media is, that mainly consists of Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, where you can find all of our episodes on, so make sure you can check out on that if you can't be asked pulling up Spotify or whatever else you listen to podcasts on.
And then
but anyway,
you should also go check out Graham, that we've linked below.
Yeah.
Oh, I have no arm. Yeah.
Yes, check out him. We're going to be linking everything below, so if you're really curious about his work and want to know more, 100% get on that. Check out his book. Not get it on Amazon, because Amazon sucks. They have enough money. You go. In other news, we've been doing a horror fest, which this is now a part of. This is October, and we are spooky people. So make sure you check out our second installment of Horror Fest. We're going to be talking about 7 more films to check out through the entirety of October.
That's out tomorrow, or if you're listening to this in a year from now, that was a year ago.
Where have you been?
Thanks, pal. Sick. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Buffalo.